Okay, welcome to our latest live interview. And tonight we've got Michael Jones, and really looking forward to chatting to you, Michael. And thanks so much for giving up your time this evening to chat to us. And we'll introduce you in a minute, but hopefully a few people will be joining us, and then we can get some questions from them. So maybe just as we get going, maybe you can just tell us a little bit about what life is like for you in these lockdown days.
Yes, difficult times for many. As most people know, I'm a race organiser now, so that's had a direct impact on my work life at the moment. But I'm using the time to do some other projects. I've got a bit more time to do things that I've been putting off for the last couple of years, basically. So that's working on some online training plans and also some merchandise, event T-shirts, that kind of thing. So I'm definitely keeping myself busy and also thinking further ahead to next year's events and things like that. So
yeah. Now I'm just assuming you're based in Wales. Is that a right assumption?
No, I live in Chester at the moment and just staying at my dad's. Yeah, my overhead's very low, thankfully. So yeah, it could be a lot worse.
Yeah. Now, you've won the Lakeland 100 twice in 2016 and 2017. So look forward to finding out a bit more about that. And as you say, you're a race organiser now. But maybe you can just tell us a little bit about your background before you sort of got into ultras and before you got into race organising.
Yeah, sure. Born and raised in Chester. And I think when I was about 8 or 9, I discovered mountain bikes. Have you got the photos there?
Yeah, we'll put those. Yeah, I'll put it up now. Yeah.
Yeah. That was how I sort of discovered the outdoors, basically, mountain bike racing. I think the first photo we've got when I was about 10 or 11, racing in the North Wales Mountain Bike Association races. And all throughout my teenage years, I was just mountain bike obsessed. I raced the national series up and down the country as a juvenile, youth and junior. Up until the age of 18, and then went to Leeds University to study product design. That's when sort of mountain biking took a bit of a backseat, really, focused on my degree a bit more. And then after graduating, I moved to the Lake District, and that's when I discovered fell running. I'd read Feet in the Clouds in my last year at uni, and that sort of really captured my imagination. And my first job after Leeds, I was based just nearby Leeds, and a friend of mine who had met through the mountain biking club had got a place to do the Scottish Islands Peaks race. And his girlfriend at the time kindly they were going to do it together, but she kind of, once she learnt a bit more about what was involved, stepped down, and I took her place essentially, and that's when I sort of started getting into fell running with Henry, his name was, and we would go and do the Yorkshire Three Peaks together at the weekend, just for training and stuff. So that was spring 2012, and yeah, that was how I sort of fell in love with fell running, really. And in the Lake District as well. Yeah,
and then you've also sent me a photo of you when you're a little bit older doing mountain biking. So was that?
Yeah, I think the second picture's when I was 16, and it's just funny because we call it being a weight weenie. So the story behind this one is I think it's the Youth National Championships. So I was age 16 at the time, and it looks like I'm really styling it round the corner, and it looks kind of cool, but I'm actually just completely out of control because the tyres I've got on are summer tyres. Every little gram counts when you mountain bike racing, and just before the start there was an absolute downpour. And it was just a funny race to look back on that very descent. Like a couple of minutes before that photo was taken, this tiny little kid in the class below managed to catch me up, and he came flying past, and that was Danny Hart, who became the world downhill mountain bike champion later on in life. So I look back very fondly at my mountain bike racing days as very sort of formative years. I learned a lot about what it is to be an athlete, what training is, and even at the age of 13, keeping a training diary and reading books about sports science and what periodization is and these kind of things. So I think like when I was a teenager was when I became an athlete, so to speak.
Yeah, and was that very much just from your own desire? Did you have anyone that really influenced you, or did it come from within?
No, not particularly. I vividly remember being about 9. That's not when I learned to ride a bike, but I learned when I was like 4 or 5 or something. I had this little fixed gear monstrosity, which is totally unsafe. But when I was a bit older, I just remember cycling around the block near where I lived, and just that feeling of freedom, like until when you're like 7 or 8, your parents are always keeping an eye on you and stuff. And then I discovered bikes, and that was a means to just explore. Me and my best friend at primary school, we'd just go home, get changed as quickly as possible, jump on our bikes and just hang out and build dirt jumps and practice wheelies and endos and stuff and just have fun.
Yeah. And then at what point did you stop cycling, or do you still mountain bike?
No, still very, very keen on cycling,
right. Yeah.
I keep threatening to get back into racing. There's circuit races nearby in Rhyl on the North Wales coast. I'd love to get back into it, definitely.
Right, yeah. Well, we've got one comment from Joe Faulkner. He's saying, "Evening, John, Michael." So, Joe, if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask them as we go along. And anybody else, we've got a few people watching. So, if you've got a question or just want to say hi to Michael, then feel free. That'll be great. So, at what point did you then move from? You're saying you were in the Lake District and you were working there, were you?
Yeah, so I graduated in product design. My graduation product was all about infant patient transport. And I got a job in Cleckheaton, which is near Leeds, with a company called Furno that make ambulance stretchers and things like that. It was just on a rolling contract initially, just first job out of uni, desperate to just take what you can get. But once I'd done that for 9 months, I moved to Ulverston in the Lake District, which is where my grandmother was living at the time. I've got family in the South Lakes area, so it's an area I know very well. And but the plan was to move there for a year and save up a bit of money to then go and do a master's in vehicle design. But there was a bit of a few twists along the road there, so I never finished the master's. But that year, it was just supposed to be a year, and I read Feast in the Clouds at university, and I just wanted to do the Bob Graham, tick in a box and move on. But the fell running bug soon got me, and it was difficult. Big change of path in my life, actually.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to that, because you sent me a photograph of you doing a fell race, and this was your first fell race. You say the Otley 7. Yeah.
Yes, very first race I'd ever done. I did it with Henry, who I mentioned before. That was the Otley Shevin. So that would have been late spring 2012, I think. I stacked it big time in that race. I think I'm wearing some Nike trainers in the photo, but they're not the shoes that I did in the race. I wore everyone's first trainer of choice, which is the Salomon Speed Cross. But that was just good fun with.
And at that stage, did you realise that you were pretty nifty in a sense of comfortable on the hills?
No, not at all. I remember fondly it's trying to get into running. Like every run I went out for, I came back feeling like I'd been trampled by a load of horses. My Achilles especially would ache for days after. And those early races as well, like my core strength, my lower back would be absolutely killing. And you know what short fell races are like. It's just full blast from the go. And I used to, if I finish in the top half of the field, that was a success for me. So right. I definitely I certainly didn't feel like a natural during any early running that I did.
Yeah. So at what point then did you start to improve?
Once I sort of started thinking a bit more about the Bob Graham round, really, the first thing I did was got the map that's available from Peak Plans. You know, it breaks it down into 5 legs. I think that's everyone's first step, is trying to get their head around the task in hand and breaking it down. So the first things were basically going out and recceing those legs, and then just having a look at what sort of times I could comfortably manage. Some of those runs were more successful than others. Some had completely epic bonks involved, but that was a very nice time. It just it brought me back to that child self, just exploring and being alone in the outdoors. And whereas mountain biking can at times be quite a lot of faff involved, you can't always ride up every trail. You're limited into what trails you can ride legally as well. And you know, mechanicals and stuff like that. I just found the idea of running from mountain to mountain, valley to valley, with a little pack on my back, just really enjoyable, nice and free. And the longer the run, the more time just seemed to melt away, and it's just a really nice thing to do. And I started to really fall in love with the sport.
Yeah. We've just got a comment from Andy Cole saying that he's joined us. So welcome, Andy.
Yeah.
And
hi, Andy.
In fact, the one time that we'd met Michael was when I was with Andy. We were training I was training to do the Dragon's Back, and we'd finished the training run, and you'd been out for a run as well. And we met at a cafe, and Andy introduced us. So thanks, Andy. Thanks for joining us. And if you've got any questions, then feel free to ask them. And also Stuart Smith has just joined us as well. He says, I don't know Michael, sorry, but I've heard some good things about the Snowdonia route and the event from friends. The route looks really interesting, and I would like to have a look further at it. All the best on getting a race director's view on it. So we'll come on to the Snowdonia race in a little bit. But I put the photograph up of you finishing the Bob Graham. So tell us just a little bit about, you say you're prepared for it, and you had done some good recce runs and got it all sorted, but tell us what happened on the day and how did that go?
Yeah, so I planned my attempt for, I think it was May the 4th, 2013. Now by this time I'd only been running consistently for not much longer than a year, so wow. It was definitely a learning experience on the day. I set off, looking back it was very silly, but I had a sub 20 hour schedule in mind. Set off a little bit too fast, puked my guts out at the first crossover in Threlkeld, and yeah, the whole day was just one disaster after another, it seemed like. But I think it was coming into the Wasdale Valley, I started to suffer really badly with my right knee. Basically, I've come to learn I have a lot of imbalances. Basically, my glutes on my right side are a lot weaker than the left, and that caused some biomechanical issues, and just really severe knee pain from right on the last leg. But with hindsight, setting off fast gave me that buffer to complete it at a nice slow pace. Basically, that most of the last leg was walking downhill as well. So. Got around in just about, but that was like definitely my first taste of what ultra running is about, really.
Yeah, and obviously it didn't put you off.
No. I think it was only the year before when I discovered that ultra running as a athletic endeavour, like you can actually race these things. I'd known about the Bob Graham round, and I'd known about fell running. But it wasn't until a lot later on that I discovered ultra running as a race that people do, and they race for 100 miles. And having completed the Bob Graham round, my attention naturally turned from that. I think it was a combination of, that mountain bike racing child plus this, a sense of adventure, the two sort of coming together, and discovering ultra running. That led me down this other path.
Yeah. We've got a comment from Mike Raffin. He's saying, hi, Jonesy. And also we got a
you're right,
yeah. I assume you know Mike, do you?
Yeah, I know him through Rob Sinclair.
Right.
I met him at the Highland Fling race. He's good friends with Rob. Rob's a great guy as well. So
yeah. I don't know if you know that he recently had quite a major heart operation. Mike.
Yeah, I saw yesterday on the other. Was it yesterday? You mentioned him recently. I remember.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Yeah. But he also did one of Mark Coburn's, lockdown
Oh yeah,
ultras, and he ran 180 miles in
yeah,
over 40 hours in his backyard. So incredible.
yeah. It's pretty. I've seen a few of these things.
I
It's
know.
pretty crazy what people have been up to. But big respect to them. I
Yeah.
couldn't do it. I thought about trying to do one of these challenges, running around the house for 12 hours, but might just be getting a bit weak at my age, I think.
Yeah, and we've got a great question from Neil McNichol. You and Neil had some good battles so I'll come on to that one because I'd like to talk a little bit about the Lakeland 100 races, and we've got a photograph up there which you can tell me a little bit about. But won the race twice in 2016 and 2017 with a best time of 20 hours 22:19, which is the second fastest ever on that route. So again, just tell us a little bit about your wanting to do the Lakeland 100 course race and just how those two wins went.
Yeah, so I've actually started, I think it's 5 Lakeland events now. After the Bob Graham round in 2013, I had a place to do the Lakeland 50. But the week before, I think it was a couple of weeks before, I raced a fell race, and I got very ill from it. I think there was like a real hot spell, and I made the mistake of drinking from some standing water, and it basically gave me the runs. So I was wiped out for a couple of weeks before the Lakeland 50, and I think that was 2013. Yeah. So I unfortunately I DNF'd that one. But in 2014 I started the 100, and that was my first 100 miler, and I remember on the start line having that same sort of scared feeling that I did at Moot Hall in Keswick before the Bob Graham round. That another step into the unknown, really. The distance. Could I finish? That was looming over me, and I managed to finish that in 2014. And a lot of things happened in my personal life in 2013 and 14. My grandmother, who I was living with in the Lake District, passed away late 2012. My mum also died when I was at uni when I was 20. So she basically left a little bit of money to me and my brother in our mum's place, basically. So I had a bit of a choice to make about, using it to. I had quite a good job at Siemens in Ulverston as an oil and gas design engineer. I think it was 25 at the time, So it was like, do I buy a house and settle down, or do I go and travel and see a bit of the world? So 2014 I made that quite difficult choice to leave the corporate world behind and sort of do some investment in myself, really. The first thing I did was move to a little youth hostel workers room in Elterwater for the winter, and my goal for 2015 was to train for UTMB. I managed to get a place in that. And I did a lot of travel in 2015 and 16, and it was when you'll notice I'm sporting quite a strong tan in that photo of me hiding behind a leaf. I'd come back from Europe and done a hell of a lot of training, and I think to this day that first Lakeland 100 victory was my strongest performance. I just felt really good from start to finish. I managed it very well mentally. Came into the race as a relative unknown. Paced it very well with Paul Tierney. I ran with him for a long time, and I just had a really, really great experience. The weather played ball, and everything just came together on that race.
Yeah. And just tell us about the photo, because when you sent that, I thought, is that the best photo you've got? You can't even see your face.
I know, I only have about 5 photos of me on that actual race, and it just tickles me. There was a lot of good puns that came out of that when I posted it on Facebook. My friend Tim, who he's paced me on my Bob Graham, and I've paced him on his Paddy Buckley round. He took that, and it's just cracks me up when I see it.
Yeah. It is an amazing route, isn't it? As you know, I've done the race a couple of times, quite a bit slower than yours, but it's just an amazing journey, isn't it? You set off from Kynaston and you do this massive big clockwise route, and you end up back in Kynaston, for your case 20 hours later. But it's just an amazing adventure, isn't it? Really.
Yeah, it really captured my imagination. I really love the Lake District, having spent a lot of time there even as a child, teenager. And yeah, if you want the ultimate sort of grand tour of the Lake District and all the different valleys as you pass into them, they all have their own characteristics, and the terrain underfoot's a challenge. But the event itself has a great atmosphere as well, and big respect for what Mark does with the charity element to it as well.
Yeah. So in that second year, you said the first year you were a bit of an unknown, so you could probably be under the radar a little bit. But 2017, obviously you were defending champion. So was that a different challenge, knowing that people would know who you are? Yeah,
very much so. I'd never experienced that before, setting off on the race definitely felt like a marked man. If I put a little effort in, everyone felt like trying to stick to me a little bit. And if you look back through the history of how the winners run the Lakeland 100, there's quite a well-known saying that if you're first at Dalmain, that you won't win, basically. So I've made a bit of a ballsy move in 2017 to pull it away early. And I think I led from Wasdale head to the finish. But yeah, it was not a nice way to run a 100-mile race, feeling like I was being chased for the whole way. And in fact, Marcis Gubats very nearly caught me, so it was not the best tactics I've ever used on a race before.
And I assume if you're leading, you've got no real idea how close they are, have you?
No, I mean, I keep in touch with people via WhatsApp on my phone. I have someone keeping an eye on the tracker, but sometimes that doesn't update properly, or there's some anomalies. I think in 2017, I don't think they were using the GPS tracking service then. So it can be difficult. There was one point actually I looked over my shoulder and I could see a runner. And at that point I thought it was game over, but it turns out it was just someone out for a run, or I was hallucinating.
I'll bring this question in now. This is from Neil McNichol, and Neil's up in Scotland, and I think he was in some of the races. Was he that you won?
The name rings a bell.
Yeah. So he's saying, hello, will Michael have another crack at the Lakeland 100 record of 1950? So your best is 2022. So you're just over half an hour behind that. And he said, I enjoyed chasing Michael around the course for a bit last year. So he was involved,
Yeah. Cool. I did start the Lakeland 100 last year. To be honest, with the benefit of hindsight, it was not a great choice, really. Like I said, I think I've started that event 5 times now, and it's becomes harder to motivate yourself adequately to really give your all to a race. The more times you've done it, I think the idea of breaking the course record has diminished for me personally now, and training for a 100-miler and recovering from it does take a lot out of you. There's only so many. I mean, I've never done more than one in any one season, so I just don't know at what point I would want to come back to the Lakeland 100 to have another proper stab at it and have a go at the record. The record really is quite. It's a ridiculous time that Terry set. It's not a course that particularly lends itself very well to my strengths either. So I would have a very hard time trying to go for that, really.
Yeah, it must be difficult as well because there's just so many good races around, aren't there? I'm sure you want to test yourself on other courses as well, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, since I've become a race organizer and set up my own business as well, it's hard to manage my time effectively to get the training into and also the mental focus to really be focused on, ultra racing. So a bit of a transition period now. I think in a couple of years, once my events have sort of matured and established, I can relax a little bit and focus more on my own racing goals. But for now, I'm just, it's basically not the priority for me.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to move on in a few minutes to talk about your own race. And we've got a question from Andy Cole and also Alex Kane. So we'll come on to those. But there's just one more photo I'd like just to have a quick chat about. And that was your 8th place in the CCC in 2017. Yeah. So can you just tell us a little bit about what it was like running in the Alps and particularly in that race?
Yeah, so 2017 I think was my last proper year of racing. Basically, that's the CCC that year. You can sort of see it on the expression of relief on my face, because I'd never, up until that point, I'd never had a real strong European performance for whatever reason. Things had always gone a bit pear-shaped. It was either I have a very high sweat rate for a runner, so dehydration is a big issue for me, and that affects my nutrition and what I'm able to get down. But yeah, that was at the end of a summer living with Robbie Britton. I rented a room off him in his chalet upstairs with Mimi Cockter, a pretty handy Swedish runner, and that was really informative year. Learning about the professional side of racing and being an athlete and stuff, and just what level of dedication is involved to cut it in Europe. Basically, there's a huge step between the level of racing in ultras in the UK and what happens in the Alps. So that picture is basically the culmination of a lot of dedication over the 2 years preceding.
Yeah, and did that race go to plan? Were you happy with your performance when you'd finished?
Yeah, definitely. Apart from, as I mentioned, Lakeland 100 in 2016, that's another one of only two where I feel like I really handled my mental strategy on the day very well. I made a very conscious effort early on. When I actually didn't feel very good early on, I was lacking a bit of strength. I don't know if it was the heat in the Cormier side of the Alps, but I made a very conscious decision to just let other runners go. Like when I was a bit younger, I'd get caught up in games and I don't want to let them go, and then before you know it, you've forgotten to eat or something, and it's all very frantic, especially in the European style races. They start fast and it's basically who can hang on the longest, basically. But CCC that year, things were not going very well for the first few hours. But as we made our way round to Chamonix, the weather cooled down. I started to feel a lot better, and I started to work my way through the field, right up till 8th. I think it came from about 25th in Champaillac, which is like roughly halfway, and reaped the rewards of my mental discipline early on. So
yeah. I must admit, it's I think whatever level you're at, it's a more fun way to run an ultra, isn't it? If you're finishing stronger than others, just the mental boost you get when you catch people and then you catch somebody else. I'm sure you've done ultras both ways. When you're getting caught, it just I know I prefer to do it that way.
Yeah, it's something I think about quite a lot, how you approach the strategy of a race, because you don't want to get to the finish line feeling like, maybe I could have gone a bit quicker at the start when I felt fresh, but similarly you don't want to be absolutely crawling to the finish line spent hours ago. So it's there are different strategies for different types of races that I employ. There's no like one size fits all way of running a race. I think there's a big difference if you're racing to finish versus racing to race and finish as quickly as you possibly can. So two very different concepts there.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating for us. You know, someone like myself, I'm not really. It's all about my performance and doing the best that I can, and you know, I quite like to see where I am in the field or whatever. But I think at your
Yeah.
level, when you're looking to win a race or finish in the top 10, it is a different strategy, isn't it? And I wonder what you were saying in that one. Was that forced on you having a slower start because you weren't feeling so well, or was that part of your plan?
No, no, I was in really good shape. I ran out of Cormier sort of in the lead group, but I always wear a heart rate monitor for the first few hours in an ultra just to get a sort of second opinion on my pace
Right.
and how hard I'm actually working. And my heart rate was just about 10 beats per minute higher than I felt like it should have been for that effort level. So
Okay.
I also suffer very mildly from exercise-induced asthma. It kicked in a little bit on the first climb. I was, struggling to breathe a bit. I just had to just calm down, basically, and
Yeah.
the mental sort of the adrenaline of a race situation can sort of overwhelm you a little bit if you're not too careful as well. So, yeah, I didn't feel great, but just being patient and relaxed and letting myself sort of ease my way into the race paid off a bit later on.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. That's it. Yeah, it's really interesting, and just seeing the different ways of running these races. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so that's given us a little bit of a sense of some of the races that you've done, and I'd like to switch focus a little bit now and maybe talk a bit about your races that you are involved in organising, particularly the Ultra-Trail Snowdonia. So I've got a couple of pictures here. One is the sort of just the description of the three races. You've got the UTS 50, 100 and 170. And then I've also got a little picture of the map around, which looks amazing. So just tell us a little bit about the build up to these races, and what was your motivation to put such a big race on in Snowdonia?
So the concept for it started in I think it was 2015 when I was training for UTMB, based in the Lake District still. And I vividly remember getting to the top of Walner Scar. Is it Walner Scar Road? Yeah. And just looking into the Duddon Valley and thinking there's a big, like, the Lakeland 100 is the blue ribbon event in the UK, as far as ultras are concerned. And then we have this UTMB thing, which is known the world over and has these, crazy statistics of elevation gain and stuff. And I just asked the question, I wonder if someone could do something like that in the UK. Like, what's a level up from the Lakeland 100? Like essentially a Bob Graham round race over 100 miles. So going over the peaks and over the mountainous terrain. And it wasn't until I moved back to Chester and started visiting Snowdonia more that I really sort of spotted an opportunity, because in my humble opinion, the landscapes in Snowdonia are a lot bigger. Like, the valleys are bigger, the peaks are higher. Generally, a lot of the trails, especially around the Snowdon area, are very well established. So it lends itself very well to this kind of race. And again, it was just a silly thought for a while. I mean, I was out of work at this place, living off savings, so the fun was going to end at some point, and I was having to think a bit about the future and what I'd want to do. But I don't think it wasn't until 2017, that summer, where I was like, right, I need to do something else now. And that was when the UTS 50/100 was born, basically. So I was very heavily influenced by the Lakeland 50 and 100, and I basically tried to think about how I can. This is throwing myself in at the deep end here, big time, like trying to organise a 100-mile mountain ultra with no previous race experience. So I tried to think about how to make it as manageable as possible, and the original race routes were based on a figure-of-8 format. So Llanberis was the start, and the 100-mile race was 2 50-mile loops, and then the 50-mile race was the second 50-mile loop. And it's evolved very quickly over the last few years, and I've changed the routes. There's now 3 races, and it's gone metric. So there's a 50k, 100k, and a 170. And now I've sort of got rid of the Lakeland 50, 100 baggage, if you like, and sort of treated it as its own thing, starting from afresh. I'm really happy with how the routes are now.
Yeah.
And I've grown in confidence as a race organiser as well. So I like to think that the new routes really do the area justice.
Yeah. And it's, I know I've had quite a few friends who've done it, including Andy Cole and a few others, and they all say just how tough it is and what an amazing event it is. So I think it's definitely achieving what you set out to do, isn't it?
Yeah, I never wanted it to be just tough for the sake of being tough. I mean, there are loads of events out there that are like that, just hard for the sake of being hard almost. But I mean, it's going to be that hard. When I started looking into the stats of all these Alpine and Gran Canarian, a lot of the ultras have a similar stats, which is per 16 kilometres, they all have about 1,000 metres of elevation gain. And I wanted to bring that influence to the UK as well. So it was a bit cheesy, but for the first year I called it UK's first Alpine style ultra, so it's I'm trying to stick to nice rocky alpine-ish paths, lots of climbing, lots of descending. And I think long term my goal is to show the rest of the world that Snowdonia is definitely a destination for trail running.
Yeah. Well, let's bring the question from Andy now, because he's asking, can you ask Mike to say a bit about his new event, Race Across Snowdonia? Shame it had to be binned this year, along with most things, but it seems to fit into a nice slot not covered by anything else on the calendar at the moment, Half a Dragon. So tell us a little bit about that race and how that was going to work.
Yeah, so to be honest, I didn't have any plans beyond UTS. I just wanted to get that off the ground, and then I had no plans to become a full-time race organiser. But I've since sort of branched out into other events in Snowdonia. It's an area I love. I know it well. I know the landowners, and I've got a lot of good experience that I can apply to other events in Snowdonia. So I now have a sky race and also a brand new Race Across Snowdonia, which was launched for this year. It was going to be July, but I've had to cancel it for this year, and that'll be next year. But it's funny how events over time, before they're actually launched, evolve. So I talked a little bit before about how UTS was an idea for years before it was launched, and the idea for Race Across Snowdonia initially was to have a mountain marathon in Snowdonia. I'd see what Shane was doing with the Rock and the Scottish. There's not occasionally some of his events visited Snowdonia, but I thought it'd be cool to have a 2-day event, in Snowdonia. But as I thought about it more and brought a couple of people in to sort of talk to them about it, that it evolved into this 2-day Race Across Snowdonia concept. So that's where we are now.
Yeah. And did you have plenty of people applying to do that this year?
I didn't, unfortunately. I launched it relatively late, which didn't help. I think it was just over Christmas last year, and part of the reason I unfortunately had to make the decision to cancel for this year rather than postpone was due to a relative lack of entries. I think financially I need about 55 runners signed up to break even on that, and just before the virus all kicked off, I had about 23. So had this not have happened, probably could have built up, but yeah, hopefully next year. And it's a pure coincidence how the Dragon's Back race is now every September, so it kind of worked well for me. Yeah. People might use it as a training run for that. So I'm trying to think positively about the current situation. It's bought me a bit more time to go back to planning and to be super meticulous about the details, and to make sure that when I come back next year with all 3 of my events plus possibly 1 or 2 others, that I'm in a good place to deliver them.
Yeah. So which is the third one then, Michael? The UTS, the Race Across Snow. What's the third one?
I also have a sky race called the Snow Skyline.
Okay.
In early May, and
nice.
that's a really cool event. I wish I could do it myself, but but again, it was about finding little niche events that I think could work in Snowdonia. So the idea behind that was I'd raced the V3K. You might have heard of that. That's the Vegan World 3000 race. That's been part of the Sky Running calendar in the past. And my thinking was, how could I just start with a clean sheet, and what would a pure Sky Running route look like in Snowdonia, because there's a lot of great terrain there, ridges and super technical terrain. You know, if that's what that's what floats your boat, then it's a great place to be.
Yeah. And is that an A to B, or is that a circuit?
No, it's a figure of 8 loop that originates in the Gwinnett Valley, so it goes up Illwyd, down to Penny Pass, and then over to the Ogwen Valley, up Tryfan Northridge, back to Penny Pass, and then Cribgoch and Snowdon Southridge to finish. So it's a real nice figure of 8 loop, taking in as many ridges and technical trails as possible. Right.
And what sort of distance does that end up?
So it's only 36 kilometres, but it has 3,160 metres climb. And the win, just to give you an indication, the winning time last year was 5 hours 22. So it's quite slow going, technical. From start to finish, it's a difficult race.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's again, it's another one to put on the list, isn't it? To do. It sounds amazing. Yeah. Thank you. We've got a question from Alex Kane, and he says, "Hi Mike, I met you briefly at last year's race when I was supporting Jamie Aarons. It was very inspiring, and the route got me excited, so signed up for September." So he's looking forward to that. He said he can't wait. And then he said, "Have you done a Ramsey round? And if not, are you interested in doing one?"
I would love to do the Ramsey round one day. It definitely looks like the biggest of the three in terms of the hills. I think it only has 24 peaks. Is that right? I know people who have done it, and they've said it was definitely the wilder one of the three.
Yeah.
And it's definitely one I'd like to do at some point. It's just being down here in Chester, the Highlands are a fair old way away to travel. When you've got Snowdonia and the lakes on your doorstep, it's something I'll get round to eventually. It's just not what I'm in a rush to do just yet.
And have you done the Paddy Buckley round? Because that's local, isn't it?
No, I haven't. But it's definitely still on my radar.
Yeah. Okay, we've got a comment from Malcolm Cochrane. Just say evening, guys. And Mike Churchard. He says, "Hi, Michael. What gave you the inspiration and opportunity to create the UTS?" You've answered a little bit. Really hope it goes ahead in September for everyone, and looking forward to it myself. Love the technical terrain and route. An amazing race. Thank you. So
cool. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah. And we've got a question from Joe Faulkner. He says, "What's your slant on sponsorship? Are your races sponsored? How has that worked? What are your thoughts on that?"
I don't know if he means sponsorship as an athlete or as a race, but I think I assume, being a chosen events organizer himself, he possibly means events. But it's a difficult one. It's difficult to find, and I think it's only going to get harder to find sponsors for events. For something I'm thinking a lot about. If we go into a recession, things like that, are people going to stop entering races and stuff? I like to think that won't happen, but if you can get a decent sponsor to get on board and share your vision for where the event wants to go over the next 3 years, that's great. As a one-man band, I feel like I'm constantly spinning plates, and a lot of bigger companies, they'll have one person who's working full-time on them for marketing that can go out and approach sponsors, and they can talk about budgets and how they can work together and stuff. But I'm kind of more of a runners race director. My priority is to just focus on the runners really, and make the business work without sponsorship, so that the event grows through word of mouth and just through people saying that was amazing. And one thing UTS definitely gets is a lot of people coming back year on year, so for me that's a good sign.
Yeah Great. Well, I think that's the questions that we've got from the audience, and we've got quite a few watching, so that's good. And cool. I did want to try and finish by 8 o'clock so we can join the applause for the NHS and the key workers. But I've got my five questions that I've been asking everybody, and so I thought we'll finish with those. If that's okay, and we've got plenty of time, so I don't feel as though you have to rush them. But the first one I've got is what's the best piece of advice you've been given for your own running?
I've been scratching my head a couple of days, and I don't want to come across as arrogant, but maybe I've just got a head like a sieve. But I've been thinking nothing's really stuck massively, apart from I mean, everyone hears this at some point in their life. Just to be patient. It's something that I would have definitely told my former self in my mid-20s, discovering running. It's definitely something I tell a lot of my athletes that I coach.
Yeah.
And it's definitely something I would tell to any aspiring race director as well. And I have to tell myself that a lot as well at times, just to relax and be patient and think of things in terms of several years, not just the year ahead.
Yeah, great. Before we go on to question 2, we've got a question just come in from Nick Wishart. And he says, Hey Mike, how do you strike the balance between setting a challenging mountain ultra route and getting the participation numbers to survive as a race organiser? UTS has a fearsome but awesome course. So is that a difficult balance?
It's a good question. I've been very fortunate that the first year I launched UTS, I remember talking to James Elson from Centurion Running on his podcast. That was when I first sort of publicly flirted the idea that I was going to put this race on. And I think I mentioned in that podcast, I'm just hoping to get 100 runners. I just plucked a number out of thin air. I had literally no idea what I was doing at this point. And it was relative to that, it was a great success in the first year. I think it had over 200 entries. So it's obviously resonating with people. There are enough people out there that want to do, an alpine style ultra in the UK. So the second year it didn't grow a great deal, but the third year it seemed like it was starting to take off before the coronavirus hit. I had nearly 400 entries, and I was well on track for over 500 this year. But UCS is my little baby, and that's the one that will spearhead the events business as a whole, really.
Yeah. But I know it's a massive amount of work, isn't it? Was it probably more than you anticipated?
Yeah, massively. A lot of people often ask, when I tell them I organise races, they say, "Oh, and what do you do for your job?" And I have to kind of tell them that this is I do coaching as well, but myself included, when I got into race organising, there's a hell of a lot more than you think is involved, and it's not just about organising the races itself. It's about managing a business as well, and doing the marketing to make sure that you've got enough participants to make these events financially feasible. There's so many different elements to being a race director that people might not appreciate at first.
Yeah. Mike Raffin's come back and said, can you answer the sponsorship question from an athlete slant as well?
I'm not sponsored at the moment. I don't mind just being honest. Very, 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 very few people make cash out of sponsorship. A lot of people get a box of kit, like Salomon looked after us very well. Nice big box of kit each year, and some travel expenses and the like. But realistically, if you want to be someone like Tom Evans and getting the big sponsors, you have to be podium at big international events. It's interesting. Like I said, I learned a lot in 2017 about what sort of salaries professional runners can expect to earn and stuff. And I'm much happier doing my own thing in terms of earning money. So through my events and racing and stuff. Yeah.
I do sense that sometimes people who are sponsored, they have to do certain races and more races than they'd want to do maybe, and it brings its own pressures, I would imagine.
Yeah, definitely. I was very fortunate with Salomon that I genuinely love their products. The shoes and everything are great. But when I started to become a race organizer, I quickly learned how much harder it is to get cash out of brands, even if it's to sponsor a race and stuff. So, I learned some tough lessons along the way. But,
Yeah. Okay, we got another question from Andy, and he's saying, what was the thinking behind marking the UTS course when others in the UK are generally unmarked? And that must have been a big decision to make, was it?
Yeah, massive decision. The whole idea around UTS is to bring the European style of racing to the UK. So to do that, really, you have to have a marked course. That's what the Europeans and further afield Americans are used to. Racing an ultra on an unmarked course is a very British phenomenon. It's something I find really cool, like the Dragon's Back. It's a lot easier from an organisation perspective, but long term, I want the race to be part of the Ultra-Trail World Tour. So it needs to be marked. Basically, it needs to be. I can't expect people to do 100 miles of navigating. Yeah.
Okay, right, let's go back to our questions then. So the second question I've got is, what's your favourite piece of kit? Have you got a particular kit that you always carry?
I mean, everyone's got to love a buff, haven't they? That's a given. Aside from that, I really like my synthetic insulation vest. Especially in the winter, that's a great versatile piece of kit. Always have it on me if it gets a bit cold. I can just wear that over a long sleeve base layer, and then waterproof over the top. I just find that a great piece of kit to have on me.
Yeah, is that long sleeved or just a gilet type style?
It's just a gilet, but synthetic, so non-down, so it still works when it gets wetted out.
Yeah, and presumably it's quite light to carry, is it?
Yeah, I've got a little Hagloss one. It packs down into its own little pocket. I think it weighs under 300 grams, so it's it's great.
Yeah,
and for the weight and the size it packs down to, it gives you a hell of a lot of warmth. So
yeah, excellent. Question about food, nutrition. Have you got a go-to food that you know you'll always be able to cope with?
As I mentioned a couple of times, with my dehydration and stuff, I don't have a one size fits all approach to nutrition, and this is something I'm definitely keen to write a few blog articles on. So the short answer is no, I don't have a one thing, but what I do is I have a different strategy for each race of how I'm going to approach my nutrition, and something I tell all my coached athletes is to carry the following four things on them during a race at any one point: something liquid and something solid, sweet and savoury, of both of those things, so that at any one point, so many things change throughout an ultra. As you get more dehydrated, your palate changes, and you prefer savoury, salty stuff. Some people can eat gels all day, but I can't personally. So if you've got all those bases covered in a race, you should be okay, and then that's obviously great to practice in training as well.
That's great advice. That's probably interesting answer, because sometimes people say one or the other, but to have something of each of the sort of different types, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, my strategy has definitely changed from race to race, like how long the race is as well. I mentioned before how my pacing strategy will change from race to race. My nutritional strategy fits into that as well. Like, for example, early on in a race, when you're racing a lot harder, it'll be a case of energy drinks, and then how that interplay between pace and what you can manage to eat. The interplay between the two is something to plan ahead for.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much. And this is a tough question, but if you could only do one more race, one more ultra, which one would it be?
Well, you asked me, have I done the Paddy Buckley round before? Yeah. And that's definitely my top of my bucket list at the moment. Okay. But I only want to do it when I'm in good shape, so I can't say when I'd like to do it. I know the route pretty well, but yeah, I'd definitely like to have a stab at the record one day, but no time soon. Yeah,
I assume the Paddy Buckley and your UTS, it must cover similar ground, is it?
Yeah, the routes cross over. Yeah. Very heavily influenced by the Paddy Buckley round during UTS. I learned a lot of that area when I was actually recceing the various legs of the Paddy Buckley round. So someone who finished UTS told me that the 100 miler was like a modern extended Paddy Buckley round. So that was quite humbling.
Yeah, excellent. And then the last question I've got is, have you got a mantra that helps you when things get tough particularly? thinking again about the mental side of racing, running.
Yeah. One phrase that sticks with me that my grandmother used to say, she'd lived through the war, and she used to say, sometimes in life you just have to do things that you don't want to do. And I think that's quite apt as an ultra runner. Like when you're suffering and stuff, it's important to, maybe it's a bit of an apathetic attitude, but to not attach too much meaning to the suffering that you're experiencing, and just to let it go and to just accept the situation you're in, and it will pass.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much for those answers and for the whole hour or so. It's been great. Really enjoyed hearing about you. Maybe just to finish, you could tell us just a little bit about what your plans are race-wise. Have you got anything on the horizon that you were hoping to do or are still hoping to do?
Well, yeah, like I mentioned, my racing is not as much of a priority for me as it was, but I was entered for the CCC. Whether or not that will go ahead, no one knows at the moment, but that's the only race I'm entered for this year.
Right, yeah. And if it's not on this year, will that get transferred to next year, do you think?
I'm not sure. They sent a questionnaire out to all the participants a couple of weeks ago asking what would people rather it was postponed or cancelled for this year and just go to next year. I can't say at the moment.
Yeah, well, we wish you all the best. Hope it does go ahead, not just for you, but for everyone who's entered that race. You know, it's such a...
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons they're reluctant to cancel is because it's such an economic boost for the area, isn't it? You know, the amount of people that come in and race and watch and visit. You know, and it's a bigger financial implication, I would imagine, as well, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's a huge event. 10,000 runners, one place.
Yeah. And you never know, one day UTS might be as big and there might be people from all over the world coming to Llanberis.
Yeah, that's not my goal with it. No. I'd like it to reach sort of Lakeland 50-100 level of, that sort of size would be great long term, but that's a few years off at least.
Yeah. Well, we wish you all the best for that, and I say it's definitely on my horizon. I'd love to come and have a go one day. That'll be a great experience. Yeah, and thank you again. We're coming up to 8 o'clock, so I think we'll stop now and we'll get a chance to go out. So thank you, Michael. Thank you so much for your time, and we wish you
thanks
all
for having me.
Yeah, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you.
Thanks. And thanks for watching, everybody. I've got 2 more lined up for next week. I've got Damien Hall next Tuesday, that'll be 8 o'clock, and then Joe Faulkner next Thursday at 7. So do tune in for those as well. So good night, everybody.